right, we're back with ThreatCon 1, the place to be to talk about emerging cyber threats with the people who matter. Patrick, here we are, episode 2 today, and our guest, Andy Boyd, the former head of offensive cyber for the CIA. I mean, we're not worthy. Thank you very much, Andy.
It's great to have you.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me. Can I just put a little more meat on that one? So I retired in October 2023 as the director for the Center for Cyber Intelligence at CIA, the mission manager for all things cyber. Operations, intelligence operations, as you know, that's our writ there at the CIA, but also strategic intelligence, and in this case, relating to nation state and non-nation state cyber threats. Quite an operation and amazingly skilled workforce. I do miss them all, but I'm enjoying being a civilian as well.
That is amazing. I mean, like, Patrick and I do some interesting things on our own, both like professionally and personally, but how cool is that?
It was pretty cool. It was a great career. I spent, that was the last job I had for about 4 years. But I spent the bulk of my job doing counterterrorism operations, as a lot of my peers did in the post 9/11 environment. I'm an Arabic speaker, so I spent a great deal of time in the Middle East. How does one end up in cyber operations after being a counterterrorism guy? It just sort of evolved that way, and I met certain people along the way that vectored me into those jobs, for which I'm very thankful. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not an engineer. I am a lover of technology, though, and I love the strategic analysis across the board that the agency did. So it took me a while to snap in as a cyber guy, but hopefully my former workforce would support this assertion. I think I did okay.
That's super cool. I think we'd love to hear, and I know the audience definitely love to hear, like what drove you from counterterrorism into the cyber sphere, because that is a big jump, and it's totally different.
I mean, initially it was because I was at that stage in my career where I was, for a more publicly known equivalent, I was at the colonel level, so to speak, and wanted to make that leap into the general officer ranks, so to speak, flag officer ranks. And I needed to take a job that was very different, a leadership job that was very different from what I was doing. And so I took a job within the Center for Cyber Intelligence, running just the operational component. And so it was really kind of an out of body experience. What I didn't expect to happen is that I'd fall in love with it. That my boss allowed me to go do a degree in cybersecurity at night. And then I just really enjoyed it. I had to go back to the field and back to counterterrorism operations for a couple of years after that. But when the opportunity arose, when Gina Haspel was director, I pitched her on the idea of me taking over, and I was very thankful she gave me the opportunity, because I really, really wanted to get back to that workforce. And then once I got in that job, I wanted to dig in deep. So I spent 4 years there. And really, really fell in love with not just the operational components, but the analytic components and all the technology innovators who give us the tools that allow us to do our mission.
That really reemphasizes one of the things that I think is important, which is like translatable skills. Like I think a lot of times people are like, oh, everyone in cyber has to have 20 years of cyber experience. But yeah, I would guess like most of your experiences with counterterrorism are incredibly relevant to cybersecurity and the skill sets that you got. And then, of course, learning and building on top of that. But
I mean, I think the most important thing was having leadership experience that could bring field experiences to the cyber workforce. I think really that's what I brought to it. But you have the prerequisite is having a passion for technology, not necessarily the expertise to be on keyboard. But really, it was my leadership experience and an interest in maximizing the potential that we had as a cyber workforce. For the mission that CIA has, you could apply the same standard to the Department of Defense or FBI, or in my buddy Jen Easterly's case to CISA. I mean, Jen, I don't think was a computer scientist, although she may have been. But really, what she brought was decades of leadership experience and an understanding of CIS's capabilities and how to be a great leader and maximize that potential.
So cool. Well, we're holding you up from your Labor Day weekend. So, but like, hey, like we're still in the summer. What have you been up to this summer? Like, what does Andy Boyd do in the summer when you're not sort of dialing into things in the private sector that you're involved in, things on, on national news broadcasts that you're commenting on? How's your summer been?
It's kind of lame. It's great, but lame. I mean, it was a very work-filled summer. Even my what sounds like a vacation was work-oriented. I was out in Aspen, which, if just left alone, that sounds great. But I was at the Aspen Security Forum and the Aspen Digital Forum, where we were talking a great deal about where we're going with cyber policy. When I'm really not working and I decouple from everything, I spend some time at the beach in Long Island with my kids and at the Jersey Shore. But there was a lot of work to be done in a lot of sectors where I'm participating either as a leader in the cyber community or consulting with some clients. So I'm hoping I'll take some vacation in the fall, maybe.
Yeah, we're vacation is at a premium at startups too. Certainly for Patrick and I. But it's interesting, and we'd love to know if in the summer, did you happen to stop by Cyber Summer Camp, otherwise known as Black Hat / DEF CON out in Vegas?
The funny thing is I did not. I mean, I have been there, but there's a variety of things, not the least of which were other professional commitments I had, board meetings and whatnot, the Aspen Security Forum included. But just on a personal level, and I'm curious what you guys think, August in Vegas. I mean, 115 degrees in the shade. I've always puzzled as to why they put that, that particular conference, right? I mean, is it the only slot that the cyber guys could get?
So, I think back in the day, that's probably how it started was, hey, this is the cheapest time of year we can get a place in Vegas.
Right.
I had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go skateboarding outdoors because it was so hot. So I mean, that doesn't mean I won't go again. It's not just the weather, but sometimes when people are calling me from there, I'm like, oh well, I'm actually at the beach now, and it's 75 and not humid. So.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, I also think it's probably what I've heard, just like being in the marketing seat from a lot of people in the industry, Andy, is that it's easier to get in and out of Vegas. It's a little more self-contained for the conferences versus something like a San Francisco where RSA is, where I think it might be hot, but there's always a lot going on, and it's fairly self-contained from an entertainment standpoint too. They have so much going on there.
But I do love RSA. I always get a lot done out at RSA, and it's always a great time. And when we emerged from the pandemic, it was great to see that San Francisco was still alive and kicking. It was still a great venue for the RSA event. So yes, now that you pressured me into it, I guess I'll try to go to Black Hat and DEF CON next year.
Yeah, come. I mean, we're out there. We love it because we've got a good opportunity with security researchers, but also operational security teams, product teams at cybersecurity companies. But it's pretty cool. Patrick and I found our way to some fun out there. We also threw a big party too. So if you come next year, you got to come to our party.
I'll just come for the party. Regardless.
Love it. Just come. It's also free alcohol, which is cool. So
but there you go.
Well, there's been a lot of stuff going on, right, in the cyber world this summer in particular. Certainly from things like Salt Typhoon, because it has maintained its relevancy in the media, but also operationally. Certainly, there's more evidence that ransomware operators are using AI to generate just like better deep fakes and things against American citizens. even things like, like Patrick and I were talking before the session today, even things like some of the analysis that Patrick's done on the leaked Black Basta logs, that was sort of like right at the beginning of the summer or the end of the spring, but that has really sort of resonated with our customers. What are the things that are interesting to you that are happening right now, that you're kind of like digging into from a cybersecurity standpoint?
Yeah, I mean the Salt Typhoon and then the related Bolt typhoons. I mean, I think that's represents a pretty critical incident. The Bolt Typhoon on more OT systems and pre-positioning of tools in Guam and elsewhere in preparation for conflict with the PRC. I mean, Salt Typhoon, huge impact, a shocker to the telecommunications industry, but at the end of the day, a fairly traditional espionage operation, just using cyber means to get to where the information is. But it was a wake up call both for the United States government on the defensive side at Fort Meade and else and in my former agency, but also a wake up call to critical infrastructure sectors, in this case the telecommunications infrastructure. I mean, I was already out of the government at the time, but anecdotally from friends of mine who are in security jobs at the telecommunications providers, I mean, there was quite a bit of communication between the U.S. government and these telecommunications providers. Granted, ex post facto, after the incident, Salt Typhoon in particular, was discovered. I'd like to get it like left of boom, that communication, so that these incidents, don't happen, or they're mitigated before it becomes a public issue. Is the way it should move forward. But the very fact that those dialogues are happening even after the fact, 10 years ago, it wasn't the case. The other issue, obviously, more recently than that, the Microsoft SharePoint hack, which again is demonstrative of, in my mind, PRC espionage talent. And we really need to make sure that we have our A game on the defensive side in the U.S. government, in that gray zone of active defense, and then our offensive tools as well. And I think we have to have a more robust dialogue now that we have a new administration. Sean Cairncross was just recently sworn in as the new ONCD director, Office of National Security director, taking over from the last administration, which is great. I do not think Jen's, although I could be wrong, because if it happened this week, I wasn't paying attention to it. But I don't think Jen Easterly's successor at CISA has been confirmed in the Senate yet, which we desperately need that seat to be filled, because CISA is a critical role to mitigate, whether it's the Microsoft SharePoint hack or Salt Typhoon or whatnot. There's one consistent theme here, that the most active nation state that's a cyber threat to the United States is the PRC. And I do think we have to have a more public and behind closed doors dialogue as to what our strategy is to counter the cyber threat from China.
Yeah, I think that's great. Hey, I have a question on this, and if you don't want to answer, that's okay. But I found it kind of surprising this summer, some of the aspects of like, oh, Microsoft's shipping code from engineers in China, and everyone acts surprised. We have Chinese engineers working on DoD stuff. Everyone acts surprised. Was any of that stuff like surprising to you? And I'm curious, like, what your response generally is to this happening, where it's like industry impact vendors, right? That are really the ones responsible for the software that's being shipped. Ties to SharePoint a little bit as well.
I haven't talked to anybody inside Microsoft about that, but I was fairly surprised that when at least for the past administration, but probably going back to 2016 in the first Trump administration, I think there was bipartisan concern about intellectual property theft using cyber tools from the PRC. A whole variety of both intellectual property within the defense industrial base, but also throughout the healthcare industry and elsewhere in the United States, and all the cyber espionage conducted against the U.S., against the U.S. government and defense industrial base type companies. With all of that going on, I'm fairly surprised that Microsoft thought it was a good idea to have people doing work on, granted unclassified work, but work in sensitive systems, sensitive but unclassified systems inside the PRC, when the access to those Chinese coders they're going to, if not directly in contact with the intelligence services, certainly not too far away. And then Microsoft had this contract line where they had digital escorts who were paid at almost a minimum wage to digitally escort the Chinese coders, which is absurd. I mean, that's just not a thing. And so I was just surprised they thought they'd get away with it, and didn't have a plan. Now, Secretary Hegseth and others in the Pentagon made it abundantly clear that Microsoft will not be doing that sort of thing again. But I'm fairly certain that the wording of that directive only singled out China. So I do think other nation states are going to be allowed to contribute code to Microsoft projects in the DoD and maybe across the rest of the government, which I was also surprised by that. But what that tells me is that Microsoft is admitting, not without saying it as much, is admitting they don't have the workforce to do that sort of coding if they didn't employ, for argument's sake, coders in Mumbai, India, or something like that. They just don't have enough. I don't know if that's the case, but I think that's what that's indicating.
Sure. I mean, those are strong indicators, and think about it also. I mean, that's the number one thing that they're concerned about outside of things like that would be shareholder value, right? And making sure that they're up and to the right every single quarter, and look where it landed them. And I think that there probably is going to be more that comes out from this. Like, more will emerge, like more mud, will kind of slide under the door, I think, when, as we get closer to, some other things that will evolve out of this.
Yeah, hopefully Microsoft, I assume, is being more proactive, but it seems like this type of stuff continually happens with them every couple of years, where it's like, oh, everyone's surprised they did something a certain way. Because I know they also started restricting access to early disclosures to some Chinese entities. That was reported on as well. So they're, definitely, I guess, top of mind, which is good. But ultimately, I think a lot of the security implications of Microsoft's strategy has implications downstream to everyone, because the technology is used everywhere.
But again, that goes back to my point of a more robust conversation, between the U.S. government and industry leaders like Microsoft. I mean, even though they have trillions of dollars of value as a company, I mean, they're still an American company, and the U.S. government has a right to have a dialogue if there's a national security threat. I just we have to get all the cyber leaders, so to speak, in place at the senior most levels so that those conversations can actually happen and actually have impact. And we're still at that early stages of the new administration on staffing most of those jobs, with the obvious exception of Sean Cairncross, who's in his job. So.
Right on. So I one thing I think that is something that we have to talk about now that we're talking about PRC and we're talking about recently what happened with Microsoft, Andy, is ransomware crews, and thinking through how pervasive this has really become, or how pervasive of a problem this has really become, not just for large organizations either, but for the average small business too. I mean, it really truly is when you're less security conscious, you're definitely you're definitely a target. And there's no discrimination when attackers are starting to target either just consumers or businesses. Is there anything that's interesting that you're seeing, or are these techniques when they're launching ransomware, I mean, are these techniques like the new is old again, or like the old is new again? What's your thought on that?
So, I mean, I think it goes in cycles. I mean, there was a spike of ransomware activity several years ago, and then that they started mitigating it. There was a lot of law enforcement activity, and then I think it's spiking again. I mean, what I really did like last year was the current AD for cyber, Brett Leatherman. They took down a bunch of infrastructure on ransomware actors, and then publicly shared their tools so that everybody could benefit from understanding the signatures of the tools, and then publicly expose the identity of the actors, and then took some fairly cheeky social media opportunities against them. And I thought that was a really, really interesting approach, because if you can't get to these guys physically and arrest them, that's as good as it gets. I mean, you can put out international arrest warrants, but if these ransomware actors are in Russia, you're not going to get to them. I mean, just the way that works. And I do think, again, like other cyber threats, the fact that we're having a very robust dialogue about the ransomware threat. I do some work with the ransomware task force at the Institute of Security and Technology, a nonprofit think tank. And I think a lot of it is sensitizing companies across the 16 critical infrastructure sectors to the reality of this, and then to our political leaders, putting a dollar figure on it. I mean, the United Healthcare ransomware attack against the Change Healthcare subsidiary of United Healthcare, which kind of runs all, CVS and Walgreens and all the pharmacy data and whatnot, and payment systems, I believe. It was a $22 million ransomware payment for that system to come back online, but the cost to United Healthcare at last time I checked was north of 1.7 billion. In addition to the $22 million ransomware payment, and that's one company. You multiply that towards hundreds of companies across 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and that is tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars that are basically being stolen from the American economy, directly affecting the bottom line of all these companies, which in turn directly affects you and me, who have either pension plans, 401ks, or whatnot that are tied up in the equity of these companies. So I believe the ransomware threat is an existential threat to national security because it's an existential threat to the U.S. economy. Paul Nakasone, the former director of Cyber Command, director NSA, has been very publicly saying similar things over the past several weeks. And I would, again, we need to continue dialogue, bipartisan dialogue, with both the Hill and the administration to have a more direct focus on this. Our friend Jen Easterly, I'm sure, talked quite a bit about this. She was very focused on this in the last administration, as was Ann Neuberger, who ran cyber policy at the White House in the last administration. There are a number of folks in the current administration who are equally focused, but I think that we need to reinitiate that public dialogue on that threat.
Well, and it's interesting because when you think about, so there's what are the threats, where are they coming from, and how do we stop them? There's also been a lot of discussion about the government ramping up cyber offensive operations and things that would almost preempt some of those threats from actually seeing the light of day and from them fully executing into the economy and, to your point, Andy, the critical infrastructure. What are some of the implications that you would say today that you're seeing are sort of aligning with maybe some of the offensive cyber strategies that you ran point on while you were still at the agency?
Yeah, I mean, the dialogue is happening. I mean, that was part of the focus of our dialogue at the Aspen Digital Forum over the summer, prior to the Aspen Security Forum. I mean, there's a number of quiet groups that are having conversations on the Hill about similar issues and how the private sector is going to be involved in that. But there's really three buckets in my mind. There's traditional cyber defense, which Volncheck is part of that equation. there's the gray area of active defense. And when I was out at RSA, people were a lot of private sector or companies were talking about like what would be the left and right limits legally on having a more active defense. And then there's more purely, offensive cyber, which my former lawyers would say is traditional government activity, or sorry, inherently not traditional, inherently government activity. Cyber command on the DoD side, and then others on the intel community side. I do think, and I taught a course at Johns Hopkins after I retired on cyber policy, where the thesis was that we don't really have a strategy on how to use our cyber tools, be it active defense or offensive cyber tools. We have a lot of dialogue about it, and there's different thoughts on it. A lot of thoughts that were, documented in the Cyber Solarium Commission run by Mark Montgomery, a retired Navy admiral. All great ideas, but we have not coalesced around this enormous body of academic and legal data and said, okay, this is our strategy. There's a lot of folks who want to use cyber tools as a deterrent. I don't really think it works well as a deterrent. I think the cyber tools are best used to help inform the defense, to understand, collecting information and intelligence and analyzing that and informing the defenders, active defenders or otherwise, how to better secure networks, how to shut down adversary infrastructure in the United States, and how to identify, APT, advanced persistent threat signatures, in a much more broad-based way than we do currently. A lot of people use the term hack back, like should we hack back against the Vault Typhoon, Salt Typhoon actors? I mean, no, probably not. There are better ways to prepare ourselves and defend ourselves from potential conflict with China. And from a diplomatic perspective, there are better ways to impose consequences on adversaries, or even non-adversaries that take cyber action that we don't want them to do, using other tools of national power, diplomatic or military or whatnot, or law enforcement if the perpetrators are rogue actors and whatnot. But we don't have that strategy yet, and I've actually, from my perch in the private sector, where I'm deeply involved in cyber defense and active defense related companies. But we're trying to kickstart that dialogue and write white papers for both the legislative side and the executive branch to help kickstart that dialogue, because the private sector has to be deeply involved in it, in many cases actually leading that, because 90% of the infrastructure associated with the attack surface in the United States is owned by the private sector.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too, because it was probably one of the questions that we were going to get to organically here, which is the collaboration, public sector, private sector. Jen thought that it was starting to improve and become sort of like more productive, but also almost like more efficient now because of the nature of the threat and the crossover between government and industry. And like we're all targets, right? But then we all need to protect our critical assets, whether it's IP or whether it's like, PII for a large financial institution, or it's critical infrastructure that the government is protecting. We're all targets. And so like, where are you? Like, where do you feel? It feels like you play like right there on the precipice of this getting a lot better and a lot cleaner.
I think Jen's right. I mean, I think we've come a long way on information sharing. There's always going to be, ways that we can tweak it or improve in certain sectors. I mean, there's certain parts of those 16 critical infrastructure sectors that are better off than others. Jen previously worked in the financial services sector. I mean, I think their approach to cybersecurity is pretty robust. But they also have resources that like the water treatment guys and the water, the wastewater guys don't necessarily have. So there's that. But I think we're actually at the cusp of a different epoch of private sector working with the government on stuff where information sharing is still important. But now, I mean, I think we're having a dialogue across multiple industries on actually empowering the private sector to take on a bigger role, and not necessarily on inherently government activity, like stuff that just you would not. There's a bill coming out of the House on offering letters of marque, which sounds like a term from the 19th century, but essentially, allowing private companies with, obviously a writ from the government to take offensive cyber action. I don't think we're going to go down that path, but what we will do, I think, is go down the path of taking companies that have either robust vulnerability research and exploit development tools, and empower them on behalf of the Cyber Command, on behalf of the intelligence community, and under the supervision of those government entities on legally and anything else they have to be involved, and on contract, so to speak, expanding the aperture on what private sector companies with the appropriate skills are allowed to do, because the U.S. government doesn't have enough manpower to do it all, but the private sector does. And Volnchek's a perfect example of that. One of the companies that I'm associated with, Red Lattice, does a lot of that, and we have a lot of relationships with the U.S. government, but I think we can deepen that partnership. And the hindrance on that had always been there is no legal justification for doing that, but a number of lawyers have written papers that are available on the internet over the past several months that their assessment of that was probably not right, and there are ways to legally do this, and there's a number of folks up at American University and law firms here in DC who are contributing to those efforts.
Super interesting perspective, Andy. Thank you for thank you for sharing this. I mean, it's really cool getting this inside baseball look at just you're only are you 2 years out or 1 year out right now?
I'll be 2 years out at the very end of September. I retired. I mean, technically, my first day as a civilian since I was 18, because I went to the Air Force Academy, then was in the Air Force. My first day as a civilian since then was on 1 October 2023.
Wow.
Thanks for serving. Yeah, that's awesome.
Seriously, thank you for your service.
It went by in a flash.
It's so much more like bold. If I think about my path to like being in cyber right now, is like I could have cared less about school and then still went to college. Somehow made it through and emerged. Being able to be employed.
Yeah. You look like you're doing fine, Tom.
Tom, I dropped out, so we're good.
Oh yeah, I mean, hey, I came close at one point. I went to Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina. So here I am, a Rhode Islander, and I'm like, I'm going down south. I'm going to play lacrosse and grow my hair long and, meet girls. And my parents were like, you have to actually work hard to do this badly, Tom. So we're bringing you home to state school. And I tried to plead my case that, I was having such a good time, but they were obviously well aware of that.
There you go.
It's too funny. But, so final question. You're going to be keynoting ThreatCon 1, our event, and it's just a couple weeks away. So we're super excited to have you down there. Any sneak preview you want to give to the audience, about your discussion with Jen? It's kind of like an offensive, defensive cyber discussion.
Well, I'm glad I'm going to be doing it with Jen. I mean, Jen is a true warrior in the U.S. Army sense. She's a retired colonel, West Point grad. And then a cyber warrior on top of that, her leadership from CISA. So I think we'll have a great time. I think it's a good pairing. I worked very closely with her when she was at CISA. We had a couple of briefers assigned to her, and we had a real partnership where I made it clear to her that the intel community was there to serve the defenders and not the vice versa. So. But I don't want to spoil the surprise, So we'll have a great time and a great dialogue, and it'll be a lot of fun.
No, we're certainly looking forward to it. And, Andy, seriously, it's just about 5 o'clock right before Labor Day weekend. So we want you to have some level of a life and some balance and everything. So thank you very much for spending the time with us today. Super fun.
You bet.
Yeah,
you
it's been
bet.
great.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Patrick.
We'll see you in a few weeks.
We'll see you soon.
You bet.
Thank you.